Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning to the Restorative Justice Grant Advisory Committee meeting for our grant application reanalysis of the 2025-2027 Restorative Justice Grant Program. My name is Rima Atung. I am the grant coordinator for this RJ program. I just want to remind everyone that this is a public meeting, so everything will be recorded on video. With that, if you can, please use the raise hand function and verbally give your questions and comments so that we can capture all aspects of the discussion as part of this recorded meeting. And of course, we ask that you mute yourself when you're not speaking, just to make sure there's no noise interruption. Since this is a public meeting and there are members of the public here, we want to make sure that those folks have a chance to speak. So we have a public comment period set aside towards the end of the meeting. However, from here on out, I will be addressing the Grant Advisory Committee. So please, if you are a member of the public, hold your comments for that public comment period. And GAC members, just to keep everything consistent and on track, if you have a question about a specific application or the process, please address your questions to CJC and we'll follow up with the applicant rather than directly talking to them through the meeting to make sure everything is equitable and follows the correct procedure. So with that, here is our anticipated meeting schedule. As you can see, we have a lot to get through. And today is going to run a little bit differently than our meetings previously, because the recommendations are going to be based purely off of your folks' scoring on that survey that we completed and the conversation today, rather than pre-prepared staff recommendations. We'll need to take periodic breaks throughout the meeting to run any or crunch any numbers that we determine any direction that you guys give us through the meeting. We'll have to do as the meeting proceeds. So for example, when we look at the results of the application scoring survey, GAC members will need to make a decision regarding the final application score at that time. So we'll need to take a break to calculate the results. So I'll let you know when those breaks need to occur throughout the meeting, but just please, bear with us. It's going to be slightly different, slightly more, a little bit less of an easy flow compared to our usual meetings where we can just start and keep the conversation going and go to the end. We will need those breaks throughout. So let's go ahead and do roll call. Avery, can I get or Lindsay, can I get your assistance with that? Whoever.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and do that, Rima.
Thank you.
Tristan Edwards.
Here.
Kathleen Meehan Coop.
Here.
Shannon Wilson.
Here.
Harry Naughton. Simon Fulford.
Here, and I can't get my video to work. Apologies.
Brandon Brown.
Here.
Elaine Walters.
Here.
Jimena Ospina Todd, I believe, is not able to join. Michael Kaiser. Okay, so we have quorum exactly, Rima.
Okay, thank you for doing that. So I do know that one GAC member was planning on joining the meeting a little late, so hopefully that member will be able to sign on. And we do know that there's a member who needs to leave a little early at 1:30. So we'll be trying to monitor quorum as we always do throughout the meeting, but please keep that in mind. We are on a tight schedule, and as always, we have to maintain that quorum so we can get those votes and make the decisions that we need to make today. Are there any other time constraints that we should be aware of at this time? No? All right, so I'll go ahead and move forward. So first, we're going to go over that information that we're required to go over every time, the GAC roles and responsibilities in application review. And we do have some new information as well. So, as always, please be aware if you have any conflicts, and that includes either actual or potential conflicts, and that is when a public official participates in an action which would or could result in financial benefit or loss to the official, your relatives, or businesses. If you have any conflicts or you're unsure of whether you have conflicts or not, we really encourage you to contact the Oregon State Ethics Commission. The CJC is relying the information that's available on the rules for, the state of Oregon, but we don't determine whether or not you have a conflict. That's really something that you should do individually with assistance from the Oregon State Ethics Commission, since they are the authority on that. So please, if you think you have a conflict throughout this meeting, please let us know in case you need to abstain from a vote. I do want to point out that the roles for this meeting are slightly different than usual. As you folks are aware, the commission, which makes the ultimate funding decisions for our grant programs and the ultimate approvals, did give some specific instructions to the Grant Advisory Committee and staff. I apologize, there's sirens going. I hope you guys can't hear it. So we wanted to just, go over some of the roles that you folks have today. So we do want to follow those directives given by the commission to evaluate and recommend funding. You folks have actually already evaluated the applications again and scored them according to that survey. So thank you for doing that. Another thing that was mentioned is to develop a reduction strategy to apply objectively and equitably across all applicants, and then to approve those applications and send them to the commission for funding authorization. So that's kind of what is in scope in the conversation today. What's not in scope is to consider any additional criteria in the evaluation discussion, to discuss any information not included in the application, or to discuss any additional analysis of the applications that are not reflected in that results of the survey. So that's what's in scope and what's out of scope today. Are there any questions or comments about that? Okay, I'm not seeing any hands, so I'm going to go ahead and move forward. So here's just the information about the grant overview and the amount of funding available. Again, we have $4 million to award. Hopefully these program types and requirements are very familiar to you at this point. So I'm not going to read through those, but we have them here for reference if they're needed at any point in the conversation. As you all know, we have the grant eligibility requirements and preferences. The only thing I want to remind you of here is that the requirements are absolutely required for an applicant to get funding. So all 6 of those things listed on the left side of the slide must be met for an applicant to be eligible to fund, versus the 7 things on the right side of the slide are things that the GAC could consider when they're determining how much or who to fund. And those are preferences, not requirements. So those aren't, the application does not need to have those things to meet the eligibility requirements. So now we're going to get into the results of the scoring survey. So just a reminder, the commission gave some specific instructions to the Grant Advisory Committee. First was to return the awards to the GAC for further review. They asked us to start fresh and analyze all applications again that were submitted under the solicitation, to conduct a consistent and equitable review process that aligns with the program rules, priorities, and criteria set by the solicitation, and also incorporates you folks' feedback in a systematic and meaningful way. And then they also specifically asked to review some additional criteria, including number of clients referred, number of clients served, percentage of clients that completed the program, average cost per client, average number of hours per client, and average cost per client hour. And those were things that were included in that survey for you folks to score, review and score. So the last part of this instruction that we haven't really heard or dealt with yet is that it was mentioned in consistency with other grant programs. The commission requested that we apply a weight to the additional criteria highlighted by the commission in the calculation of the final score. So we'll get into how we can do that in the following slides. Any questions or comments so far? No. All right. Is anyone awake? Uh,
We are awake.
glad to hear it.
Yeah.
All right, so I'll just move on forward then. So we have this visual of the process today just to kind of lay out where we're going to go. So we're going to determine the weight of the commission highlighted criteria in calculation of the final applicant score, determine how the budget reduction strategies that we pulled from the survey will be applied, and then get into approving the awards, hopefully. So we're at step number 1 currently. So here are the results of that survey, and we're just looking at the total score. So just overall, between 4 to 6 GAC members scored each application. For the majority of applications, we did have 6 scorers, but of course there were a few where folks had to abstain. So on those specific applications, 4 to 5 people scored them. For the score, all we did was add up the scores for the section across each GAC member and average them out. So we didn't, this is just what you guys scored averaged out. There's no other calculations involved. For the eligibility questions, if half or more of the GAC members scoring the applicant marked any application or any eligibility criteria as not met for that applicant, then we deemed that applicant was ineligible because they had to meet all of those eligibility criteria. So if any one criteria, more than 50% or more of the GAC members scoring it said they didn't meet it, then they didn't meet it at all. And there was only one applicant that was deemed ineligible to fund using that kind of strict analysis, and that was Union County, as shown on the bottom of this table on the right. So I'll give you guys a minute if you want to look at these scores. Again, this is purely just what was submitted to us in the survey, totaled and averaged out. And then applied in rank order of highest to lowest scores. Pause here. All right. So again, I'm not seeing any hands up at this point, so we're just going to move on to the next step in the decision-making process, unless folks want to discuss at this point.
Quick remote, sorry. Is the score, what would the, if someone got like a perfect score, what would they be?
75, I believe.
Okay, cool.
But let me just double check. It might be 85. Hold on. Oops, sorry. Oh, I hit the wrong thing. I apologize. I think I need more coffee. All right. Yeah, 75. Okay, I was right.
Cool. Yep, thanks.
You're welcome. And that's summing up, you know, all of the different sections, eligibility criteria, preferences, those additional criteria, and then the budget questions that were added. All right, I'm going to go ahead and move on. So, you know, this is the way that we have been using sort of a similar formula to incorporate these weights in other grant programs that have been getting approved through the commission. So this is our proposed formula for how to determine the weight of those commission highlighted criterias and then incorporate them into the final score. So it's a pretty simple formula. Basically, what we're offering as a method is to do the percentage of points possible for all sections of that application. So that's the eligibility, preferences, and budget, adding up the score for those and calculating the percent of points possible that that applicant received for those sections. And then also doing the same just for that commission highlighted criteria section. So summing those together, sorry, let me explain this a little bit differently. So multiplying the points possible for all the sections, excluding that commission highlighted criteria, times whatever the weight is you folks determine is appropriate for those sections, adding that to the points possible times the commission highlighted section score weight, and then that would be the final adjusted score. So it just tweaks the weight for the two types of information based on whatever weights for those two sections you folks think is appropriate. And I apologize because that was not explained very well, but we have an example here, and I'll get to your hand up in a second. Let's just walk through this example. So applicant A has an initial total score of 69 points. Out of that 69 points, they scored 80% of all of the points possible for all the sections, excluding those two questions that the commission highlighted as the information they want us to weight on. So if you multiply the weight, which we're showing here in the example as 35%, then their score for that section would be 28. Similarly, say they scored 70% of points possible on that commission highlighted section, and the weight we're showing an example here is 65%, then their new total for that section would be 45.5. So their final adjusted score is 73.5 points, and their initial score was 69. So we're just weighting those two questions related to the commission highlighted criteria a little higher. So that makes up more of the total score, and their score goes from 69 to 73.5. So Elaine, did you have a question or comment?
Well, you mostly answered it, but
Okay.
I'm just waiting to hear if there's some reasoning for how to weight it, because in this example, you've weighted the commission preference higher than the eligibility requirement. And so I'm just wondering if you could share any of that reasoning, or is that just for us to kind of figure out?
That is exactly what we're asking you to figure out, is how to weight those two sections of the application. We included this as the example because the commission did point out that they want it weighted for those criteria, so we gave that a higher weight. But again, that is completely up to you how to weight those sections. So, you could do 50-50 or 80-20 or 20-80. It's really up to what you folks think is more appropriate. So this is where your discussion really comes into play. Like how much do you want to prioritize those commission highlighted criteria, which includes things like the cost per client hour, number of clients, that not only the commission, but you folks in conversation previously has highlighted as something you want to be one of the determining factors in this process.
So one last question. These
Sure.
are all lumped together, and I can sort of see that for the for the eligibility criteria? I mean, because the way the eligibility criteria were written, it was sort of like, did they meet it, yes or no? And then how well did they describe it in the application? Was the way that we kind of looked for that. But is there a way to do we need to clump together the criteria so that they're all weighted equally within this general average of weighting preferences? Or could there be a different weighting for one of the preferences compared to the others?
Theoretically, you could. The more complicated the formula gets, I think the more difficult it becomes to
Right. I guess I would imagine that there would be a breakdown of maybe 2 more, not 5 more, something like that. So yeah. So thank you.
We did, going with what the commission said as trying to create a process that was more simple and easily understood. We separated out only into those 2 categories. But again, you guys can make that determination. We just might need a longer break to calculate. So it looks like Simon has a hand up.
Thanks for that, Rima. Elaine, I liked your questions. I definitely would caution us around trying to put too much weighting into if we get really granular, I don't think we'll end up repeating this like again and again. So I think we should be cautious there. And I know we had a general sense that a lot of the sections, the eligibility criteria and preferences, as we saw, all but one of the organizations met those, and then the scoring matrix that the CJC gave us allowed us to weight those individually. We said, did they meet this? And then we kind of ranked how well they did or didn't. So I feel like there's a weighting already built into that, or as part of the scoring. So I think I caution us to not sort of almost redo some of that to get to complexity. I think the question probably is, for me, do we weight the existing criteria higher or lower than the commission, highlighted additional ones that we all discussed as well? Didn't really say much, but it was repetitive.
Yeah. And I think that was an excellent point, Simon, because you all did have that capacity to score each individual item. Really what this calculation is doing is, we only had 2 questions in the survey related to those commission highlighted criteria. This is just tweaking the dial so those 2 questions make up a larger part of the total score. But all of the questions, we already received your ranking on those, your score on those. So that's built into the scoring already, hopefully. I think Simon said it better, so I don't know. So it's really just, do we want to turn the dial so that stuff is weighted more or less than the other sections? And again, we did include this example showing it weighting more, because that, going back through the commission instructions, that seems to be in line with what they said, but it is your purview to make whatever recommendation you feel is appropriate. Shannon?
Yeah, I didn't get the explanation at first, but now I'm tracking. So thanks for taking time with this. But I think that so what I'm hearing, Rima, is that the intention is to kind of or the whole purpose of this is to signal to the public and the commission that, like, yes, like we're considering what you highlighted, what you sent back to us specifically to consider. And so it makes sense to me, since they're the ultimate kind of decision makers, that we kind of like reflect yeah, that we're taking that in consideration. So I don't know. My initial thought is that, yeah, we weight those specific things perhaps a little bit higher, so that
Mhm.
it's in line with, it just seems like it would be in line with this whole additional process. Hopefully that makes sense.
Thank you for that. So this is one of the primary decisions that we're going to need to make throughout this presentation today. So this is really, right now is the space for you guys to have this discussion. And the next step is going to be to vote on what you think the weight should be. So just, you know, please feel free to share whatever thoughts you have. This is really the meat of what we're doing today. Simon, looks like your hand is up again today.
Yeah, I'm just going to support what Shannon just said. That's a good reflection of the sort of mandate we've been asked of by the commission, and that kind of on behalf of the public of Oregon, as it were. So I support Shannon's perspective that those commission criteria should have a higher, some sort of, more, more weighting than the others, given that we know that everyone had to meet the other criteria just to be in the running anyway, which they all did bar one.
Okay, so it sounds like we're sort of, at least some of us are sort of on the same page. So I guess the next question is, would the distribution of weights be different than what is shown on screen? Again, this is just an example. So you can say if you think that other numbers are appropriate, and we'll absolutely, be able to adjust for that. So Elaine?
I love that somebody else has already thought really deeply about this with the same need in mind, which was that the commission guidance and the preferences really needed to be weighted more heavily. And I don't know that I could make any reasonable argument for changing it up a little or down a little if we're going to weight it in this direction. So I don't know how I would mathematically decide that I wanted it to be 70-30 instead of, yeah.
What the commission usually does when they have these discussions is kind of talk about conceptually what they think is more important. So it's not necessarily a mathematical conversation, and then we try and apply that mathematically, but it sounds like you're in agreement with this example here.
It sounds fine enough to me. I guess what I'm realizing is in the application, so this is the application to the scoring, and we're going to get a new sort of run of numbers, and it may change the order and it may not. So that will be interesting just to see. But the other thing is where there's going to be another big decision is some sort of a framework for making funding decisions that applies either on some basis, that we can run fairly across. So I think there's like this 5-dimensional thing. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So this is the first decision point, and then based on the weights that you folks vote on, we'll apply the formula with those weights to that final score, or to the scores, and that will come up with our final adjusted scores, our final rank based on those scores. And based on that, we'll get into the funding discussion. So Simon, it looks like your hand was up.
Yeah, a question for my colleagues, would it be helpful if Rima flipped back to the slide that showed the CJC's sort of those additional criteria that they wanted us to consider, just so it's in front of us? And I would really love to hear from other folks who haven't spoken yet.
Okay. Tristan?
Hi.
Looks like your hand's up.
Thank you. So first, I just want to put on the record that I have submitted a conflict on pretty much all of these applications. And so before I say anything further, I'm just curious about my ability, given that, to participate in this portion of the discussion.
So again, I think, you know, we can provide the information that the state has in terms of what the guidelines are around conflicts, but CJC isn't approving or denying conflicts. That's something you need to determine on your own with help from the State Ethics Commission.
And I did consult with the State Ethics Commission. I guess what I'm asking is, this is a conversation about, general process and overview of every single application, not a comment on any one application. So I just want to make sure if I'm saying anything that's proper. Because I do have a conflict. I submitted with the survey that I conflicted off all of the applications.
Right. So I'll leave that up to you. What our commission does is folks still speak on general discussion topics and abstain from specific voting. But that's a determination you're going to have to make yourself.
Okay, then I think given just the high level of generality that this portion is, I would just say that, yes, I agree with Simon. I think it'd be helpful to look at the criteria from the commission. I also think that I co-sign what other people have said, what Elaine had said in terms of doing a stronger weighting of the commission's criteria. 35 and 65 seem like really dramatically different numbers to me. I think that perhaps lowering the weight, I don't know, just evening the weight out a little bit more strikes me as a little bit more in line with the grant goals, simply because I think that the other criteria are also important. But yeah, that's all I have to say for right now.
So do you have specific weights that you would recommend, like 40, 60, 30, 70?
Yeah, I think 45 and 55 were the numbers that came to my head. It feels a little bit like I'm just pulling numbers out of the air a little bit. But those were the numbers that came to my head.
And Simon had requested that we go back and look at those criteria. So it's listed here in this third checkmark bullet, just for your guys' reference.
Oh, that reminds me, I have one other question.
Sure.
Because these criteria, a lot of it has to do with number of clients who completed the program, et cetera, et cetera. I guess built into that is a disfavoring of new programs, which I do think, given our financial constraints, does have a logic to it. And I also think that's another reason to balance out the weighting a little bit more.
Thank you for that. I do want to remind folks that this is based on what was included in the application itself. So those numbers for the new folks were their estimate of how many folks they would serve. So.
Oh, so the new applicants made an estimate of how of these numbers.
Yeah, and in fact, some of them, so this is our scoring on their numbers. This is not their numbers. So it's not gonna do a number price point. It's our scoring on that.
Yeah.
Excellent point.
Yeah, so in fact, some of the implementation programs did better than some of the established programs in that regard from when I scored them, because we actually had numbers for programs that were established that were, didn't appear quite as efficient. So that wouldn't have been how mine came out, I guess, is what I'm saying. Although I do support, and I'll shut up now, Simon, and to your point that other folks may have something to say about, I am understanding your logic, Tristan, about weighting it not quite so dramatically different. So
yeah, and I will just say, just knowing that for the new programs, it's an estimate of what they're expecting does really give me pause, because I think what we've seen with established programs is the estimates were much higher than what the reality showed, just in terms of, all of the challenges that are attended to developing these kinds of programs. And so, I think that we should keep that in mind when we're deciding the weighting. I think we should keep that in mind when we're deciding our reduction strategy, that it's much easier for a program that hasn't implemented yet to, say that they're going to have this high number of participants without knowing if, being able to know that that's really the case.
Yeah, that's definitely a concern to keep in mind. I do want to just second what Elaine said, though, is hopefully that was taken into consideration when you did the scoring. So it should be reflected in the scores for those sections. So currently on the table, we have weight going back to this calculation slide of 45-55 being proposed right now. So how do other folks feel about this weighting? Kathleen?
When I'm looking at this, I guess my first reaction was in line in the fact that I thought it was a little high, 65%. However, there was a comment made earlier by someone that I think reality is that we're having to make some very specific decisions. We know that the majority of the proposals have already passed that basic eligibility. So my gut reaction initially was to lower that the commission portion, but more I sit here and think about it and the harder decisions we're going to have to make going forward, I think I'm leaning toward the 65%, as I'm speculating that it may allow us to identify those top proposals a little easier.
Thank you. So we could compromise between those two different proposals and adjust them slightly. So instead of doing 45 for the other sections of the application, we could do 40 and 60 and kind of split the difference. Again, I'm just throwing out ideas, so it's really up to you folks. So whatever we decide on, whatever it seems like there's consensus on, we're going to take a vote on. And then those will be the weights. So it looks like a couple hands went up. I think Shannon was first.
Thanks. Yeah. To your knowledge, Rima, has this ever occurred before where, I mean, obviously maybe it has because you have this kind of proposal already ready to go as far as the weighting, but what have other advisory committees typically landed on in how they weighted the commission highlight? Yeah.
It varies a lot. This is definitely a typical type of formula that we have. I mean, obviously it changes format based on what information we have available. In this case, it's very simple and straightforward because we're going based only off the score of these two sections. But it is definitely like a format for the formula that we have used across grant programs. A similar case would be the illegal marijuana market enforcement grant that was just approved at the last commission meeting. And for those, we did 50-50 for the weighting. And that was determined solely by the commission on what they thought was appropriate, but it really varies.
Okay, that's right. Yeah, that was my question. It's about precedent. Like, is there a typical, is it more like a 60, 40, 60, 25, 75, but it's all over the place?
Yeah, it
Okay,
varies
well-
based on the circumstances and what the
Okay.
goals are. Yeah.
Okay.
And it looks like Simon also had his hand up.
Appreciated that question. I had the same one. I'm just going to say I like the 60-40 kind of splitting the difference at this point. Just if that helps move things on.
So that's 40% towards all the other sections and 60% towards the commission highlighted criteria, correct? Yes, I'm seeing nodding. Okay, Tristan, your hand was up.
Yeah, I guess I'll just say that I am more confidently in favor of the numbers that I pulled out of thin air earlier. Just knowing that some of these programs are making estimates on the criteria. So just throwing, my name in the hat for 45-55.
I would really love a go around of folks that haven't weighed in yet to know kind of other people's thinking.
So Brandon, it looks like your hand is up.
I'm more inclined to lean in on what Tristan has said with those numbers. I'm already feeling like some of these numbers are already going to be unfair anyways, because there's people who were unable to vote. So that means your average number is going to come out a lot lower than some of these others. And then you got assumption numbers. And like Tristan said, all of us had made assumptions, or all these applicants had made assumptions from the get-go, and those numbers didn't turn out to what they assumed.
Mm.
So I voted on some of those things, with giving them a higher score because of those assumed numbers, which entails isn't also fair to the ones that have actual numbers. So I'm more inclined to lean in on what Tristan was saying on the percentages.
Okay, so we have, it sounds like, two proposals on the table, with some folks in favor of the 45-55 and some folks in favor of 40-60. So anyone else want to weigh in? All right, so what we can do. Oh, what we can do is have someone propose either one of those scenarios and go ahead and take a vote on it and see where everyone, lands across the board, or we can continue the discussion. How would you guys like to proceed?
I think we should take a vote.
Okay. So,
I guess
Shannon,
Yeah,
sorry.
sorry. Then can we just have a in between as an option then too, since we're at 20 and 10? Can we throw in a 15 just to, because I think that's like balances out all the concerns that were raised.
So what would be the weights for each section then?
Oh, I thought you were going to do the math on that. Sorry. But just like if folks are saying 40-60, and then I believe the other one was 45-55, then I guess the other
Right.
one would be like the 47.5 and whatever the difference is. But I'm just saying that because we have a good record here on what folks are considering, and just to kind of give an in between. I mean, I think I'm kind of showing my hand here, but that's what I would lean to, is just like trying to find a balance between what's been proposed already, taking everybody that has made comment about that into consideration.
Well, yeah, what about 48 and 50, whatever that is, 48. No, I'm sorry, I'm going the wrong direction. Anyway, sorry, I'll be quiet. Somebody else could do the math.
So just to split the difference between 35 and 40 for the first section.
I think the difference between the two proposals of
Yeah, that's
40-60,
correct.
45-55. And I would support that.
Okay, so 45 plus 48. So it would be, whoa, that is not correct. So it would be 37 and a half and 62 and a half. Is that right?
No, it would be somewhere between 40% and 45%.
Yes, that's correct.
and somewhere between 55 and 60%.
So 50-50? I'm getting confused myself. All right,
No.
let's have other people
I
do
think
it.
it's 4250, 4250.
37 and a half and 62 and a half. So
No, that's
between,
going in the wrong direction.
No,
oh. So between
Go
40.
go up to 38 and then 62. 38 and 62 is between them.
Right, 30, it's between 35 and 40 for the first section. I'm super confused now.
can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry. I think, the two proposals that we're splitting the difference on was a 45 to the existing criteria to 55 to the commission highlights, or 40-60. And so halfway between those two, I would make that 42-50 weighting percentage on the kind of existing criteria, and a 57.50 on the commission weighting, and hopefully that should add up to 100%.
I thank you, Simon. Your math is mathing today. Shannon, looks like your hand.
No, sorry. I was just giving a thumbs up and I accidentally hit that.
Yeah, okay. All right, so does somebody want to go ahead and make a motion for that? So it would be for weighting the criteria excluding the commission highlighted criteria at 42.5 and then weighting the commission highlighted criteria at 57.5.
I'll make the motion.
Okay.
I'll second it for Shannon.
Okay, thank you. So can we get a roll call vote?
Yes. Tristan Edwards,
I vote in favor.
Kathleen Meehan Coop,
I'll vote in favor.
Shannon Wilson,
Yes.
Simon Fulford,
I vote in favor.
Brandon Brown,
I vote in favor.
and Elaine Walters.
I vote in favor.
All right.
Great. So it sounds like it passes. So those are the weights. Thank you for that discussion and for coming to a vote on that. So now is going to be one of those breaks that we talked about at the beginning. So we're going to need at least 25 minutes to just take those weights and apply them to the scores, come out with that new ranked table that shows the total adjusted score for everyone by rank. So we're gonna, like I said, need a little break for that. So if we can come back, it's 9:52 now. In 25 minutes, that would be fantastic. And I can't do any math today. Thankfully, we have people in spreadsheets to do that part. So
So you will come back at 17 after.
yes, sounds perfect. Thank you guys very much, and we'll see you in 25 minutes.
Thank you very much.
All right. All right, it is 10:17. So hopefully everyone is back now. So on the screen, we can see what that formula with those weights applied, how that works out to the final adjusted score. As noted on this table, Union County is still listed, but they're noted as not eligible. And then there's the initial and adjusted score for each of the other applicants. Just overall, the scores shifted a little bit, but the relative ranking is still mostly the same among applicants. So I'll just give you a couple minutes to kind of look over that and absorb it before we move on to the next step in the process. And we can always come back to this table as well. And it looks like we still have quorum at the moment, which is excellent. So we will definitely need everyone on board for the next discussion.
So the top 5 stayed the same, but a lot changed in the lower half.
And I guess I would just, my reflection is that it seems to be what changed in the lower half are that established programs dropped to the bottom, which I think kind of comports with my concern about the estimates.
Let me just apologize. My dog is sitting next to my feet and seems to want to bark at people on the street. So if there's barking, that is what's happening.
Hey, it's okay.
So the top 8 are still the top 8. Or 9. And then 10. The bottom 4 reorganized.
Okay, are we ready
Oh,
to
I
move?
guess the one exception is that Lutheran Community Services got moved way down. That's the one that got bumped the furthest down. That one and conflict artistry bumped down the farthest. Mm-hmm.
So are we ready to move on, or do you want to absorb these for a few more minutes? Like I said, we'll see the scores again. So Shannon, looks like your hand's up.
Yeah, I think one thing I just want to kind of put out there and on the record is so this kind of tells me maybe that folks were waiting for like forecasted numbers, for the newer programs, the same as like more similarly than I would have thought than the established programs. You know what I mean? Like it seems like, or maybe that's not the case, but I don't know. Would it be beneficial? Because maybe I didn't hear that the first time, but is it beneficial to just say if that was part of her weighing consideration? I don't know, because I think that there definitely, at least in my mind, there should be more weight given to established programs versus new programs because well, for a number of different reasons, but because we're actually dealing with like not best guesses, but actual like what we know is happening in those different areas. Um, So I don't know. I don't know if we need to make space for that or not, if that's just gonna muck things up, but yeah, I'm just a little bit concerned that established programs aren't being prioritized like I thought they were. So I just wanted to put that out there.
To, as much as I can speak to that, we did take all of the numbers that were for both established and new programs, what they were reported in the application. So not even the numbers that we have internally, it's whatever they reported in the application, which was sometimes different, even for those established programs, than what we see on our end through quarterly reporting. And also, again, I can't speak to how folks individually scored things, but the intent was to have those considerations be built into whatever score was given for those sections, as Simon and Elaine mentioned previously. Looks like Elaine's hand's up. I think you're muted.
Sorry, I will say that I think I did a fine job scoring between the established and the implementation, but that there were some very significant budget concerns about some of these that would have changed my weighting in ways that are much more impactful than they were related to the numbers served. But it was really also that combination of the budget too. So it wasn't about whether they were established or implementation. I don't think I weighted implementation ones higher. I think I looked at budget and may have weighted some lower based on sheer cost to resource. So just to let you know that I think I did fine around the implementation versus established. Yeah.
I guess a question on my end is, as we move through this process today, is there a way, if we want to prioritize established programs, is there a way in the, whatever process we're going to work through moving forward to account for that?
So the method that you folks chose was through the survey. So this is the results of the survey. That would need to have been noted in the scoring process, and it did not come up in the scoring process, either, through the scores themselves or through that free response section where folks mentioned, what budget reduction strategies to apply. So we're going based off of the survey that you guys completed and what you said there. So at this time, we're using those results to guide us. So Shannon, looks like your hand is up.
Yeah, thanks, sorry. So my intention is I just want us to all get an opportunity to put on the record that we made, whatever considerations, that we made, or the considerations we made, like, for instance, like it's a criteria weren't there. I just want to make sure that because I think the last time there was a lack of transparency about some assumptions that either were made or weren't made. So I'm a little bit I just want to make sure that folks are given an opportunity to say, yeah, I took that in consideration, like Elaine just did. Like Elaine's like, I did a good job doing this. I kind of balanced this, just to give an opportunity that we all can say whatever it was, so that this isn't getting kicked back for us to flesh out more and do over again. Because I know that folks need their funding, and I know everybody's time is valuable. So I guess I was just trying to, yeah, just asking for space for us to just have an opportunity to say, yes, I did. Yes, or oops, I missed that. And I didn't, I didn't do that. But does that make sense? I'm not trying to create more work for us. I was trying to just make a clear record so we're not doing this again.
I appreciate that clarification, Shannon. It looks like Elaine has her hand up as well.
Yeah, just lastly, I do think that when we look at the budgeting aspect of this, we're going to have a really significant lift to figure out what we're using for funding criteria. Because even where people are, I mean, it's kind of painful at some level. The whole thing is, and I'm a little scared, just because we want to do the right thing. And the way these scores moved around is also impactful, but so will be how we decide what, because one decision could be we want to fund all of these. They all met criteria, and here's how we're gonna sort and organize that. And I think that's going to be the place, Tristan, in answer to your question, where we could look at sort of some fairness criteria that would cover, I hope, geography and impact and established versus implementation. I think that's the place where we can apply some across the board criteria to think about our budgeting process. I hope that's, I mean, that's certainly what I wrote in my ideas for things, is that we have room for looking at the state and the impact on these services as part of our criteria for making some budget decisions, and that could include those components.
So that is a great segue for us to move forward so we can get into the discussion on how the budget conversation is structured for today, if folks are okay with that. So just to remind us where we're at, we have determined the weight and those final application scores based on our previous conversation. So now what we're doing is determining how the budget reduction strategy that you folks identified through the surveys gets applied to those applicants based on their final score and rank, excuse me. So just a reminder, the requested funds across all applicants was about $8.5 million. We have about $4 million, or exactly $4 million to award. So we need to cut or reduce the budgets by 4.5 million. So we did start with those, GAC approved reductions that we discussed previously. So that's, making adjustments for calculation errors, removing unallowable items, which we are tasked with doing no matter what, removing out of scope line items, which are those costs that were unusually high compared to similar line items in other budgets, and then adjusting the administrative costs accordingly. That was approved previously, and that step removed about $417,000 from the total ask, which leaves us with about 4.1 million left to reduce budgets by to meet that amount available. So we do have a big task in front of us today. So
Remote.
Yep.
So, sorry, quick clarification. Does that total budget, the total ask, include or exclude Union County, who's been deemed ineligible?
It excludes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So similar to how we looked at the scored part of the survey, we took those free responses where we requested, which budget reduction strategies you folks wanted to discuss. We categorized them by which budget reduction methods were described. Some might have a few different methods described. So we, categorize them by each of the ones mentioned. And whether or not the suggested method was feasible at this point in the solicitation process. So we did get a few good ones that are just not possible at this point in time. 5 out of the 7 GAC members who participated recommended some type of scaled or tiered budget reduction methodology based on the applicant's score. So that is what you folks are saying is the most appropriate. So that is what we have on the table to discuss today. Of those, 5 members recommended 3 tiers based on the applicant rank and mentioned something similar to high ranking, middle ranking, and low ranking as how to do those tiers. Any questions or Elaine, it looks like your hand is up. Oh, and you're on mute again.
So it sounds like you've taken all of the feedback and turned it just into a math problem instead of so it's only quantitative, not qualitative, and we can't look at things like geography or established versus implemented.
So established versus implemented, maybe if enough people had answered that way, but based on the survey responses, it wasn't mentioned across the board. In terms of geography, it's just not feasible at this time. That is not something we talked about previously in the solicitation. So we thought about it, and it just isn't feasible to do at this point in the solicitation process. So we did look at the themes across all the answers, and then applied, counts to those themes to see which ones rose to the top. So what's on the table now is how that reduction strategy is applied. So on the left here, we have the applicants and that adjusted score. And then we have some examples of how that tiered or scaled percentage could be applied. One is to do top down, so just funding until we run out of funds. And then the applicant that's on the last ranked order would get only a percentage, whatever percentage is left. Then there's some other options of how we could do tiering. So, excuse me, in the middle column here, tiered plus wide range. If you look to the table above it, it tells you what those ranges are. So like the top applicants would get 100% of their adjusted request. So that's the request minus all of those adjustments that you folks approved previously, like taking out allowables. Then the middle folks would get, a much lower percentage of their total ask, and the bottom folks would get only 10% in this example. This is not a recommendation, it's just an example. And then in the example for tiered versus narrow range, again, the percentages that are included are in that column directly above it, the funding ranges by tier. So in this example, the top ranked would get 75% of their total budget, middle would get 50%, and the bottom would get 27.55. So I'm going to move on from this slide, but we'll come back to it. So in this application of the tiered reduction strategy, you have options of different things you can adjust. One of them is, like I said, to do that top-down method. And the second one, if you're doing it based on the other two examples in that slide, all applicants that are eligible receive some funding. So what you can manipulate are the cutoff thresholds where those tiers are and the funding percentages for each of the tiers. Those things are adjustable based on what you folks think is appropriate.
So the only thing that's in our discretion, I just want to be really clear, is the math. There's no discretion around weighing the impact of the losses or the gains based on communities served. All of those are completely off the table now. So we're going to negotiate math. It's all completely. I just want to be really clear, because I was the one of the two apparently that I didn't know there was going to be like a majority vote on the way we did this process. I figured we would come with some ideas and think it through together, but it sounds like it's been narrowed down to strictly the math of dividing up the $4 million. And it's fine. I just want to be really transparent that
based on the results of the survey, that was overwhelmingly what people said. So that, I think, is what our discussion should be.
Okay.
That is what you folks told us was the most equitable way of dealing with the funding, the budget reduction. So
Therein lies the pain. No judgment. I'm just trying to figure out how to think in the middle of what feels fairly heartbreaking.
it will be a heartbreaking decision no matter what, because we got so many good applications and we have such limited funds in comparison. But unfortunately, this is the decisions we have to make. So our job is to try and do that as objectively and equitably as possible. And like I said, that was the strategy that rose to the top. So that is what's on the table for discussion. So I can go back to this slide if you would like. Again, these are just some examples of what that could look like. And as the slide that I just moved away from mentioned, those the cutoffs and who is included in each tier can be tweaked, to a degree, because we'll still have to meet that $4 million amount that's available. But you can change who is included in the top tier and what those percentages are, who is included in the middle, the bottom, et cetera, and what those appropriate funding percentages are. So do folks have any thoughts on that? And Union County is included, but they're grayed out and not funded in any scenario, just FYI. So Simon, your hand is up.
I'm going to be very controversial if anything, to prompt discussion. As painful as it might be, the top down, people have done a lot of hard work on these budgets. And we've had a lot of discussion in several of our previous meetings about, even reducing people's budget allocations, challenges the effectiveness of the programming that they've designed. And as much as I would love to fund the majority of the programs, I'm wondering if the radical proposal is to do the top down and, you just kind of go through that. So most people are getting exactly what they've asked to deliver the projects and programming as they've planned. The only one there that would be funded that falls out of that is CCRS, although they're also a very, they've had some lower scores in other ways, so maybe that helps them build some capacity or something, I don't know, but that's a bit of a radical proposal.
Yeah, and I guess my concern with that proposal is, just simply thinking about this decision between established versus new. That we have programs that have developed, that have built, ground, that have cases, that have training, that have, established themselves. And then we have programs that have ideas, and that's great, and they have good ideas. But I don't want to see us waste investment that we have made in the past.
Looks like Brandon's hand is up.
Yeah, again, I'm gonna have to lean in on what Tristan says and not go with the going tier down, because once again, that would be us sitting here saying that we believed in the programs at first that started this, but now that there's new programs and stuff, let's just forget about the people that are already established. And for some of the ones that have already been established, some of those orgs were fresh starting orgs. And it takes more than 3 years for an organization to really kick out numbers and show that they are there. So I would really hate for us to have to back away from supporting the orgs that have already been supported.
So it sounds like we had one argument for the top-down methodology and two against so far. Do other folks want to weigh in?
I think I would lean toward the top down because my concern would be with funding all the proposals when we start looking, and I realize these are just examples and the amounts could be changed. You're getting to a point that it's when you're only offering somebody 10 or potentially 27, 30% of their proposal, there isn't a direct correlation. You know, if you cut somebody 20%, they're only not going to be able to provide 20% less services. There's a bigger impact. And I think, for instance, you know, for a group that may literally only get 10%, I can't imagine what they potentially could do with that. They might have some great ideas, but I know as a program director, I would struggle with coming up with a solution when the amount was that little. But I do hear the argument of established programs, and kind of going back to what Elaine was talking about. I know that when I was completing the survey and put in my thoughts on the whole process, I didn't realize that it was going to be taken from the standpoint of this was our final decisions. I said, I think that's part of being part of a review committee, that there's additional discussion that happens because a lot of times people bring up comments and ideas that you hadn't thought of that can impact where you end up. So from that standpoint, I understand why we're here. At the same time, I do find that process a little frustrating because I do value the input of the community in making these final decisions.
So I think another thing to keep in mind is we had initially proposed doing 2 meetings, but we're at 1 meeting, one longer meeting now based on your folks' discussion. So we're kind of hemmed in to trying to focus the budget discussion even more so we get the decision done today. You know, I understand your frustrations and I think they would come up regardless of how we did the process. So again, we're trying to just do as instructed by the commission, a simple, straightforward process based on what you folks told us you wanted in those surveys. Elaine, your hand is up.
Well, it's not because I have a ton more to say. It's I agree that we would be frustrated in having to cut programs, but because there's not enough money to go around. But the impact, there's no way in this process to measure the impact of cutting the programs, you know, because we're not allowed to take that into account. And that is the thing that we talked about at the last meeting, that we were looking for a way to assess. And several of us presented information, I think, in our survey results that included looking at, you know, I mean, the amount of budget for some of these requests. I mean, it is interesting that the two that were concerning to me, very low numbers and very high budgets, do end up in that bottom tier. So there's something mathematically that is kind of showing that. And I'm working with what I have. Other people may have more information about what those programs do and why they're so expensive for so few people served. So we're not going to talk about that today, but I'm just saying that's how my mind worked, and it did end up sort of ranking things that way. So I feel a little bit of relief that it's showing up in the math. But the comment I really want to make is that that I wonder about a tiering that, I mean, I can say as a program myself that's still trying to get implemented a lot of stuff, that some money is better than no money, you know, in terms of keeping services and resources going. So I agree with Simon that people worked really hard, but people are used to working really hard on budgets and working with the money that they have. And the difference between what's also not being considered is that the amounts that were asked for are not being able to take. They're so decided. We're not allowed to look at the fact that one program asked for a huge amount of money, and that these these smaller budgeted programs, the smaller budgeted programs would be taking a bigger hit than in my perspective as an executive director. Then it doesn't mean that other people wouldn't have to reduce, but the fact that $168,000 budget, you know, I guess partly what I'm saying is if we have to do a tiering, I like the tiering that is more narrow rather than wide, but those might not be the right numbers. And does that, I guess my question is, does that preclude us or keep us from having a drop off, so that could we do partial and tiered? Where we look at sort of and I'm not saying we should lose people, but I do worry about just a straight percentage when the budget numbers are so totally different for a smaller program. And the place we did take geography into account was to ask people about whether they were serving rural or not. So it was one of our questions. So I don't know. Help.
It is very difficult. And to your question, yes, these are just examples. So similar to what you folks recommended previously, we could apply a tiered reduction strategy where the folks in the bottom tier do not get funded. That is a possibility. It looks like Tristan's hand is also up.
And just to say, I don't like that. I'm just trying to think about where our parameters are, because I do think those lower tiered programs would benefit by having some funding, and so would our communities.
Yeah, so I think that I know that I am in favor of the, you know, some version of the tiered and narrow range. I think that we should shift the numbers a little bit. I think that the people in the lowest tier should get a little bit more than what is reflected here, and that the people in the middle tier should get a little bit less than what is reflected here. I have said at other meetings, similar to what Elaine just said, concern over programs that asked for enormous budget amounts. And, you know, to my view, we're kind of getting the benefit for simply just asking for a lot of money. I actually think that the tiered / narrow range, the way that it's kind of shook out here, does account for most of my concern in that regard. But I would advocate for moving up the percentage a little bit from 27.55 and moving the percentage down a little bit from 50%.
Thank you. And similar to how we did the last time, once we get some percentages, we can take a break and do those calculations for you. We just need to, you know, get to the place where we have those proposed percentages we can look at. I just want to go back to the top down versus tiered. It sounds like folks are more into not being in favor of the top down, and the conversation is moving towards being in favor of one of those tiered examples. And it looks like there's a couple of hands up, I think Elaine and then Shannon.
No, I don't need to say anything else. I just had my hand still up.
Shannon, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I definitely like a tiered approach rather than the top down. I was wondering So, okay, so I'm also, I'm a director of a nonprofit, and I'm thinking about budget situations and thinking about when doing grant proposals. And so I'm fully disclosing my bias here. And, um, typically if you're like considering administrative costs and things like that, I think that maybe is the most wiggle room in the budget that you propose. Knowing that we only have about half of the funds available that ultimately everyone kind of sought, that asked for. So it's the request is double the amount of what we have. Knowing that that's the case, I just would like to maybe put out there that we do perhaps like an initial 10% reduction, um, just like off the top, and then try a tiered approach moving forward from there and see what happens with that approach. Because yeah, again, just like from my perspective as a director, you're not padding your request, but you do have to be, anyways, you do have to be creative with like, and be flexible. And I think that 10% usually like allows for you're going to be flexible. You're going to find a way to make it work. In my opinion. So I just wanted to put that out there.
So just to reiterate, at this point, based on just comments that folks have shared during this conversation so far, it looks like the majority are in favor of some type of tiered approach. So we're not well, Kathleen it looked like you wanted to say something,
Yeah,
so maybe I'll backtrack.
I am more in favor of a top-down approach. I think we could maybe make some adjustment to that. Maybe there is like a 5 or 10% adjustment to provide that last funded proposal. But I also look at this that this is a competitive proposal. And by funding everybody, although it seems like the most fair thing to do and everybody wants to be very supportive, it is a competitive process and there isn't enough money. So I'm kind of still leaning toward the top down, maybe with some slight adjustments to be able to better support that final proposal in that mix of, that's considered a higher level proposal. So that's kind of where I stand.
So we can still do, just to kind of go back to what Shannon said and then to respond to what you said, Kathleen, we can start with like 90% of the adjusted ask as the top award amount, the top tier award amount. And again, like you folks approved previously, the bottom tier can be 0 if you want to draw that line. So in those tiered model, or if we apply those tiered models, again, the line for how many people are included in each tier, how many applicants are included in each tier can be shifted, and the percentages can be shifted at your discretion. We can also take a vote at this point to, officially include or exclude the top-down method if we want to just formalize it, or we can just keep the conversation open. It's up to you guys.
I would make a motion to exclude the top-down approach.
Okay, and do we have a second for that?
I'll second that.
All right, let's go ahead and do a roll call vote.
Okay, Tristan Edwards.
I vote in favor.
Kathleen Meehan Coop.
I vote against.
Shannon Wilson.
In favor.
Simon Fulford.
He froze. Oh, there you
He
are.
did freeze. He's freezing. I vote against.
Brandon Brown.
Vote in favor.
And Elaine Walters.
I have to abstain. I don't know enough yet.
Unfortunately, we have just quorum, so you will need to vote.
Oh, I can't abstain and meet quorum?
Not under our new guidelines, no. Or guidance.
Oh my God, this is wrong.
It's very frustrating, but we have to have quorum on every single vote. So we're forcing participation.
I was going to try to make a different motion. Against, oh no, for excluding it. Yeah.
Okay, so then that passes to exclude the top-down option, Rima.
Thank you very much for that, Avery. So now the discussion is going to be really on, who's included in which tier and how wide or narrow those percentage ranges are between the three tiers. And Elaine, did you have something that you wanted to come back to say?
Yes. I was going to make a motion actually to wipe out the middle one, the wider range. I didn't sound like anybody was very interested in that, but I want to ask a question now that that vote just happened, and that is the possibility of, I mean, I don't know how we're going to do this, but the possibility of having a tiered and folks that aren't in one of the tiers potentially, if that, I mean, I know we just stopped the top down, but you said that there's room to think about who's in the tiers also and how that line is divided. So it just would be interesting to see some of the math around, for example, making the top tier narrower, the middle tier wider, or the bottom tier wider. So that I just want to make sure that there's room in there, but it does seem like we were leaning towards a more narrow tiering structure.
We can definitely do that if we have numbers to do those calculations with.
Right, understood. But I just wonder if we could get rid of that middle tier of the much wider spread, because it just leaves such a small amount at the bottom that I don't think it makes any sense. So should I make a motion?
You can. The wide and narrow really just applies to what percentages are applied.
Yeah.
So if you just
I know that. Yeah.
if we want to focus on what percentages would be appropriate and where the lines are, that might be better. Although we can do the vote if you still want to just X out that strategy of having the top funded at 100%, basically.
No, it's not necessary. Let's just go to the math.
Okay.
So I'm happy to.
Sorry, go ahead.
For the sake of discussion, I'm proposing that we do a top tier of 3 organizations. I'm going to suggest at 85%. We do a second tier of 3 organizations at 65%, and a bottom tier of the remaining organizations at whatever that calculates to be when you divide it all up in some way. I don't quite know how you do that, but
so it was top 3 at 85%.
Yep. Then the middle 3 at 65%.
65%.
And then the remaining projects at however you balance out that bucket.
Okay. What do folks think about that?
I think that this is Shannon Wilson here. I think I understand the intent of what Simon's trying to do here, but I think that just arbitrarily saying top 3, I mean, that could be a little problematic. So whatever we do, I think we need to base it on like either above or below a certain number, or like equally like split it up evenly into thirds for the entire group. I just worry about if we just say arbitrarily top 3, so that's the only thing I'd have to say about that.
So can I, Shannon, this is just for discussion's sake. It's not arbitrary to me in the sense that there's a scoring and a ranking. So it's based on the score. certainly in the top parts, I guess. I can counter my own argument for the lower levels.
What were the percentages for the second ones?
65% for the middle three. And of course, we can, if you want to see that in action, we can calculate that and come back.
So
I
this
guess
is Shannon Wilson again.
go-
No, Simon, thank you for saying that. No, I hear what you're saying. Not arbitrary in the sense. I was just saying if we could root our decision in something, this is what I'm leaning towards. Like, if you were, you know, in the 70s, right? Like this is just a hypothetical. If you're in the 70s, this is the amount. If you're in the 60s, this is the amount. If you're in the 50s, this is the amount. If you're in the 40s, you know, if so on and so forth. Because then we can tie it back to the weighted score and not just say it. That's what I meant by that. My apologies.
So in that
So
instance, it would be the
uh,
top 5 in one tier, and then I'm not sure where those other cuts might be, since
I'd like to, if I can make a proposal that's kind of based off of what Shannon just suggested. And I think it would be, you know, I guess what I'm asking is for the CJC staff to do a bunch of math and give us a bunch of options, because I'm not saying I don't want to see what Simon proposed, but I would be interested in seeing, you know, the top tier be everyone that scored 70 or above, or I guess in this case, 71.59 or above. And then the middle tier be the next 4, and then the lower tier be the next 4. And when it comes to like what percentage, maybe it's just, yeah, that I'm not good enough at math for this. But I don't know that I can have an opinion on that yet, just because
Yeah,
what I'm suggesting is going to change the numbers around.
so I think what you're recommending to make the top tier 70 and above, that is what the example is on the screen. So
Okay, yes, then I guess what I'm suggesting is that the bottom tier should be, oh, wait, let me see here. Maybe I counted this wrong. Oh, I thought
because
there were,
Union County is on the
I
list, but it's
counted
not
Union
included in the
County, you're
funding
right.
yet.
Yeah, okay. Then I guess another way of doing this is just to shift that number up a little bit, so it's 4, 4, and 4.
I saw at least one other hand up. Elaine, did you have a comment?
yeah, I'm just running the math, and when you do what she just said so you would go, anyway, I'll come back in a minute. Go to somebody else first. I'm doing the math, and then I'll have an answer for that question.
Looks like Simon, your hand is up again.
I like the idea of maybe in 4, 4, and 4, what Tristan just said, and that might tweak. And then the percentage for the top 4 might be a little higher, and I don't know, but sort of a 4, 4, 4.
So would you like us to run a scenario where we do the cutoff so it would be Deschutes County, the top 4 for the top tier, the next 4 for the middle tier, and then everyone else in the bottom? We can do that. Your initial recommendation was for the top to be 85%, Simon. Do you want us to start with that number or attempt something different?
Well, now I have an answer. So if you do that, if you do the top 4, if you do 4, 4, and does that leave 4 then? 1,
Yes.
2, 3.
4.
Then that actually leaves, that puts the bottom tier at 67%. So you can go a little higher on the middle now, because the top one is at 85%. The middle one is, you put it at 65%, and that cut enough out that it left a bigger chunk at the bottom. And so what that leaves percentage-wise is 67.5%. So you could go up a little bit in that middle tier if you wanted it to go down, down, down.
We would definitely need to double check those numbers because
Oh,
that
I
doesn't
know.
quite make sense based on how they're showing now. But we can start with the 85 and 65 and see where we get with the bottom tier if folks want to do that.
Well, what I'm telling you is I think we need to make the middle tier a little higher.
Okay. So we could do 85 and then
70
75
or
70.
70. Mm-hmm.
Okay, we can run that. So
Yeah,
moving the cut points, so it's 4, 4, and 4, 85, 70, and then see what's remaining for the bottom tier group.
Yeah, I would support that.
I support seeing those numbers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Okay.
may want to see more numbers, but I support seeing those numbers right now.
Excellent. So we will need to take a break for about 15 minutes just to run the math and double check our numbers and make sure everything is good and nobody's misreading anything and to update our slides. So we can do that. Do you have any other number scenarios that you want to just look at now before we take a break so we can do some comparisons?
Yeah, I almost wonder if we might end up with 2 tiers the way we're doing it, but I'd like to see the numbers when we come back because I think, yeah. So anyway, thank you.
So just one, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, sorry. The other set of numbers that I'd like to see is instead of giving that increase to the middle, give it to the bottom. And so maybe, what was it, 85% for the top? And then what did we said? We had said like 75% for the middle?
So the scenario we're running is 85 for the top, 70 for the middle.
Okay, then I guess I'd want to see maybe like 65 for the middle.
65
for
the
looks
middle.
like.
Okay. So we're going to run those 2 scenarios and then we'll come back to you in 15 minutes. So at 11:23, we will see you again. That sounds good. All right. Thank you very much. And I think we'll break slide. All right, we've got 1 more minute on the break. Hopefully folks are back or on their way back. Okay, we're officially back. I believe we still have quorum based on folks that are at least signed on. So if GAC members could just, if possible, turn on their camera real quick so we can make sure everyone's back. Or give a thumbs up or something, that'd be fantastic. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so we'll go ahead and get started. So here are the results. So just to walk through the whole thing again, the starting point in that column in the middle in blue is their adjusted budget request with those GAC approved reductions taken into account. And then scenario 1 is the first one that Simon had recommended, with the top 4 applicants getting 85% of that adjusted ask, the middle applicants getting 70%, and then the remaining getting the percentage that, we could stretch the funds beyond that, and that turned out to be 21.31%. So the second scenario that was recommended was to keep that top tier at 85%, do 65% for the middle group, and then the percentage that worked out to be for the bottom group is 23.13. So that's what the numbers look like with those 2 scenarios applied. So thoughts, comments, the floor is yours.
This is Simon. I like scenario 1.
This is Tristan. I prefer scenario 2. I haven't decided if I like it yet.
Yeah, so similar to the last discussion we just had, we have a couple of options. We can talk more about these 2 scenarios and, what that might mean for our awardees. We can try different scenarios, or we can take a vote on one or the other of them. It's really up to you guys at this point. Lane, it looks like your hand is up.
Yeah, I just don't like the spread being so wide. So I don't know if I wouldn't touch the middle one at this point. I would leave that alone, but I might bring the top tier down to 80 and then see if that gives us a little bit more room on the bottom tier. Although people aren't ending up with nothing, but they're ending up with quite a drop. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and Simon, your hand is up as well.
I strongly oppose that. I'm going to go back to my point that I think trying to fully fund or trying to give the maximum funds to a number of all of these projects is going to give them actually the best chance of success. I think if we start spreading it all around it, I think that's just spreading it too thinly, and we're going to dilute the impact. And I think scenario 1 still gives, I know it's super challenging. I've I'm in the nonprofit sector. I wouldn't want to be in the situation of the folks in the lower tier. And it allows them, they were the sort of quote lower scoring projects. This could almost be like some sort of planning funding, not that I want them to just plan and not do anything. But for them to rework something, but I really strongly advocate that we don't just keep diluting around. Otherwise, let's just do 30% across the board to everyone. And I think that's a terrible outcome.
Okay, I think Tristan's hand is up as well.
I would advocate for Elaine's suggestion. I think that even taking down the top by, a 5% is going to still allow for operation of those programs, and the numbers in the bottom tier, just make me wonder about, the ability to operate in a way that's effective. And so I would advocate for 80% of the top and keeping the middle the same, and adding a little bit to the bottom.
And Kathleen, it looks like your hand is up next.
I agree with the comments that Simon made. I'll just leave it at that.
Okay, and Shannon?
Yeah, I also agree with the comments that Simon made. And again, just thinking about it from operational standpoint, yeah, it's like I'd rather have it be closer to the upper amount, like the 85%, and then the 70, because that would allow folks, I think, even with the reductions we've done, to be operational with, hopefully little, it will be significant, but as little adjustments or harm to the folks that they are currently helping. And when I'm looking at the bottom, I'm thinking about, this clearly isn't enough for those programs to continue from the budgets they proposed, but at least it's something to allow them to, plan and maybe even help finish, guide the current participants through. That's kind of what I'm thinking. I don't think that there's such a difference between, when we're looking at the bottom, between scenario 1 and scenario 2, that it would make that much of a difference for those purposes.
So from just based on those comments, it sounds like there are 3 folks who have spoken in favor of scenario 1, and then a couple of folks that have spoken in favor of a different scenario. Do we want to take a vote at this point? You're also welcome to just continue discussion.
Brandon has his hand raised.
Oh, Brandon, sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna lean in on Tristan and Elaine's idea of dropping that top tier down to 80%. I think no matter what, it still leaves everybody with some room to function and move as an organization.
So it sounds like we're split 50-50 at this point.
Oh my God.
It's never easy.
Oh, that's not
Well,
good.
I'm going to push and say I'm making a motion that we approve scenario 1.
Okay, do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, so let's go ahead and do roll call vote to approve scenario 1.
Okay, Tristan Edwards,
I vote against.
Kathleen Meehan Coop,
4.
Shannon Wilson,
In favor.
Simon Fulford,
In favor.
Brandon Brown,
Against.
and Elaine Walters.
Against. I have so much respect for all of your thinking. It's driving me nuts.
Okay, so I don't really know what to do because it's tied.
So,
If I can break in, Rima, real fast.
yes,
So,
please.
this is Rachel. If it's tied, then you just have to go back to the drawing board. So that motion didn't pass. and just see if there's compromise or if somebody else is willing to make a motion.
I don't know if this is getting us closer. But it strikes me that scenario number one is kind of the furthest away from what Elaine and Brandon and I are suggesting, at least. So I think that my preference would be to choose between scenario two and to have the CJC run the numbers on what an 80% reduction at the top would look like. I think that at least gets us closer to being able to make a choice, maybe.
So we can absolutely run those numbers. I just want to clarify, it would be an 80% funding, so 20% reduction, right?
Yeah, sorry, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, and so I guess my motion is to, and I don't know if I need to make a motion for this, maybe we can just run the numbers and come back. I guess my motion would be to eliminate scenario one. But I also don't feel pressed to make a motion right now. I think I don't know, whatever is gonna help us. I don't know which route is gonna help us get us closer. So I can make a motion if that helps us, or we can just crunch the numbers.
So
And
we
see where
can, we have numbers that we can share with you. If you want to give us just a couple minutes to, to run them, we can do, what I've heard so far is 80% for the top tier. And then what would be the
65% stays the middle,
65 stays the middle?
and then you
It's-
figure out the percentage for the bottom.
It's gonna be really close to the 23.13. It really only moves up a few percentage points,
Okay,
just because of the amount of funding that we need to. I mean, the ask compared to what's available, it's moving very little, but we can run those numbers for you.
yeah, I think I would like that, and maybe seeing how, small of an impact it's gonna be will be helpful in making a decision.
So, so it was 80, 65, and whatever's left over.
Mhm. Yep.
Okay.
And then Shannon
So-
has their hand up.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Shannon.
Yeah, I'm just gonna take up a little bit more time because again, when we're looking at these nonprofits and we're talking about like looking at this from an operational standpoint, that those cuts to when I'm looking at this, I'm looking at the difference between what the requested budget was and then looking at what the award would be, the difference between scenario one and scenario two. There's such a difference there for those organizations that they're not going to be able to operate as they are right now. And so when I'm thinking about, so the harm is just like the harm has occurred, whether, and I don't think that, $20,000 more, $30,000 more, is going to make that much of a difference for those organizations, because they're probably looking at a vast change or even kind of wrapping things up at that point. But the harm caused when you reduce folks that we think we see this and we think that they will be operational, that even that 5% difference is going to significantly impact their ability to be successful moving forward, because they are most more likely to be operational. So I'm just again, this is my experience, just small experience working as a nonprofit director, but there's just some considerations that I just would like to highlight when we're talking about how we're when we're making this decision. So thanks.
Thank you for that comment, and I think Tristan had her hand up next.
Well, as I think Elaine said, I respect all of your feedback so much. And I think that Shannon's comments have pushed me towards scenario two.
Okay, I think Elaine is next up.
Yeah, I could lean into that as well. The fact that it's just a small percentage we could lean into, although I don't agree that we actually know the impact that the cuts already are going to have or in any of the programming. I think the difference between somebody who's got a very large county budget and somebody who's has to create their program out of this funding specifically are going to have different impacts. And so I don't know. I don't have a way to know. So we're trying to be as fair as we can. I can lean into scenario 2, just knowing that the percentage is so small in any changes at the bottom, but it's not because I think more harm, less harm. It's because I don't feel like I know.
Okay, thank you. Simon, your hand's up next.
I'm just going to echo again, and I think really what Shannon said is I think we should focus on the greatest chance of success for the top 2 tiers, which is the majority of the programs. It is such a dramatic cut to the bottom 4 programs, the lower tier. Don't want to say bottom 4, that lower tier. I think they're going to have to retool those projects and their goals and objectives so dramatically that I really think our responsibility is that will shape, and the CJC will support them through that process and guide and advise them as that process unfolds. But I think we really need to maximize the chance of success of the projects in those higher 2 tiers, which is where I really think the scenario 1 is the best solution.
So we can take another vote on scenario 2. I do want to note we did crunch the numbers in the background, so we can look at what the new proposal is with the 80, 65. The bottom tier raises to 26%. So like I said, it's a very small percentage increase. But we can take a break and put up that slide, or we can take a vote, or just continue the conversation.
I'd make a motion to approve scenario 2.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Avery, if you don't mind doing a roll call vote, please.
Tristan Edwards,
Vote in favor.
Kathleen Meehan Coop,
Against.
Shannon Wilson,
Against.
Simon Fulford,
Against.
Brandon Brown,
Or
and Elaine Walters.
4.
So once again, we are tied. So
So it sounds like we are 50-50 on scenario 1 versus scenario 2. So
I love that you're keeping scenario 1 alive for the fight.
So Rima, if I
Kind of a
may,
sure, Rachel, please.
this is Rachel again. At this point, we've, unless there's another scenario that you all want to vote on, we can take this to the commission and have them break the tie. That is an option. We've done that in the past when we haven't been able to get a majority vote for GACs or GRCs. And so if we are at an impasse and you all have 2 recommendations for the commission, we can allow the commission to make a decision if needed, unless you all have another scenario or some sort of compromise between the 2 votes and motions that have been made at this point.
I would like, I guess my initial reaction is that sounds like a good idea. One, because we've been speculating about whether these bottom organizations can even function, and we may get kind of clarity on that between now and the beginning of January that could impact this budget and decision in a different way. But that's just the first thing that comes to mind.
So at this
there wouldn't
point,
be, sorry, Rima, I'm sorry. There wouldn't be any room for additional information to give to the commission. It would literally just be these 2 scenarios. And so there is no room for clarification or any other process outside of this. It is simply the GRC is at an impasse and could not make a decision based on the information they had. So there isn't any room to go get clarification on anything else.
I guess
if you all can't make a decision.
Okay, I guess what I was thinking, and maybe this is an extreme scenario that just would never happen, is if a organization in the bottom saw these numbers, knew the choice, if they might rescind their application just because the number is so low, but maybe that's just not realistic.
I don't think we can count on that. That's not something that it occurs normally. I mean, we would just go through the regular award
Yeah.
process and timeline.
I'm not a government expert. My guess would be if that scenario did happen and the CJC commission would approve the scenarios in front of them, and there would be a separate process to decide what to do with unallocated funds if a project pulls out. That's certainly my observation of how these grant programs work in a government space.
That is correct. And the commission does have the opportunity to do a completely different decision. So these decisions are never finalized until we make the actual award notice. And then we would follow the regular process for, accepting or not accepting the award at that point.
Rima, this is Shannon Wilson. Would like putting this to a vote for the commission, would that delay the release of funds for folks? Because I definitely don't want to do that.
It shouldn't. So we are, aiming for the agenda in January. Hopefully they would make a decision at that time. They could potentially kick it back. We can never guarantee what they're going to do because they have, full autonomy and we just do what they tell, what instructions they give us, we follow them. But they know, they're very aware of the fact that the applicants have been waiting for these awards for a long time. So I think it's their priority to approve whatever awards they can make. Hopefully that answered your question. We could also, take a vote on one of the scenarios again, in case anyone has moved their opinion, so that we just have one recommendation, or we can do as Rachel suggested and present both and have them make a decision.
I have a question. Given last time there was a lot of public comment that went to the commission, is that still potentially something that could happen again?
Yes, there is always an opportunity for public comment, and the commission does read all of that, listen to all of that, and take it very seriously. That is just a part of the process, and it would absolutely be available again.
I think that's a good question, Kathleen, although I kind of assume that the fact that the commission pushed this back to the grant committee and that we implemented, I guess some more sort of stringent guidelines and criteria, the scoring matrix that we had, and then this weighting process would hopefully kind of satisfy any public comment criticism of this outcome.
I agree, and I agree. I'm just, yeah.
Yeah.
Looks like Tristan and then Elaine also had their hands up.
Well, I appreciate the public comment being brought up because I guess that makes me lean a little bit further towards letting the CJC break the tie because they will have received public comments and maybe we'll have a little bit more information to help make their decision.
Elaine, did you have a comment as well?
Similar to Tristan, I think they've got a lot of work behind these numbers done. They're really clear. The arguments for one versus the other are also pretty clear. Scenario one is really funding as much of the operations as we can of the top scored applications, and the next one is tending to the folks that are in that bottom tier a little bit more. And I think I think it's a great place to leave the decision, is to let them sort of weigh those and listen to folks. So I agree, and I don't need to, I think it's great to also just let them do some thinking about this along with us. I think it would back up the decision as well.
Okay, it sounds like there's consensus that we present both of these as the GAC recommendations, scenario 1 and scenario 2, and the breakout of percentages and funds that are presented here in this table, and let the commission make the determination on what scenario should be made. Is that where we're at? Okay. I'm just checking with the team.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I think that I would rather send them with a clear decision. I'm really concerned that this is just going to get kicked down the road. And I know that we've already there's been enough back and forth. I feel like that is an incredible disservice to everyone. So if there's something, I mean, I'm still looking at this and I'm trying to find a middle ground. Yeah, I don't know. What are the time constraints here? Because if it's like something we can put an additional, 15 minutes, 20 minutes into, and then we have a solid scenario to send to the commission, I'd rather do that than risk it back and forth.
So we have, I think until 1:30 when we might lose quorum to continue this discussion. We can keep hashing it out if we want to, make a decision and have one unified recommendation. We can split the difference between these two percentage breakouts. And I see people nodding in both directions, so the floor is really yours. So the options on the table are continue the discussion and try and come up with one recommendation, or move forward with the two recommendations. And Simon, your hand is up.
I appreciate your comments, Shannon. I think it would be nice that we gave a clear advice from the grant committee. We are seemingly still split 50-50 on each. I'm still going to make an impassioned plea. And again, I could argue against myself. We're not talking huge amounts of money either way, but I still really stand in favor of maximizing the impact, the positive impact, budget impact on the top two tiers. And like I said, the four other programs are going to have to do such recalibrations anyway, that I think it's incumbent on us to give the best chance of success to the majority of the programs, which is the scenario 1, even though we're talking small amounts of money. But for nonprofits, even that small amount can make a difference.
Yeah, and I'm just trying to find something that works. So am I hearing maybe the folks that are concerned with, are the folks that are in support of scenario 2, is it that small difference for scenario 2 for folks in the bottom tier that we want to give them a little bit more? Is that kind of where, if that's where folks are, rather than do a 5% jump down for the middle tier, I wonder if we can get that increase that you all are hoping for by just, I know I don't like this idea, but I'm just trying to come up with something by taking the top tier and just doing maybe like a 0.5 or a 1% reduction to give that bottom tier a little extra. But I'm really, really concerned with that middle tier losing that entire 5% from one scenario to the other.
I think I've probably, like, at this point, probably made it clear that I have, I'm concerned about established programs, and I know that there's going to have to be really massive changes regardless. But I guess the way that I see it, with those massive changes needing to happen, having a little bit extra, I guess I see the same way for the bottom tiers as maybe Simon is saying for, the top and the middle tier, that little amount of money can make a difference, especially when they're having to readjust massively. And yeah, just cognizant of the fact that there are so many established programs in the bottom tier. So that's where I'm coming from. And for what it's worth to other people on the grant review committee, I'm not the executive director of a nonprofit.
I will say that is my holdout, is wanting the, I mean, and I'm actually not looking at specific programs, but the amounts. You know, the difference between $1.4 million and $300,000 is not one that I can quite wrap my mind around. But the difference between 200, you know, that some places there's 30,000-40,000 difference, and that's a half of a staff person or more capacity. So you know, the $20,000 difference between, you know, the bottom one and the $8,000 one is not so much. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I guess that holdout doesn't have a lot of return on investment at this point, in terms of really protecting programs. Maybe it ends up being more, I don't want to say philosophical, because every $1,000 matters. You know, every $1,000 can buy supplies, can buy, you know, a part of an FTE. So I don't want to say it's philosophical, but it is that leaning towards, you know, we're already gutting them. Can we, you know, can we give them a little more cushion? So I don't know. I'm being a little wavery at the moment, but don't count on me to change my vote. Not quite.
All comments are welcome. It looks like Simon has his hand up as well.
I'm gonna just, I guess, kind of from my perspective, you know, we're talking about budgets, and we did a whole weighting process of those budgets in our scoring process, where we made some assessments on whether those budgets were reasonable for the proposed activities, et cetera, et cetera. And some of the comments, I think, are kind of reopening this. Are we now saying, was that a reasonable budget, or was it not a reasonable budget? And I think we should be cautious there and let the scoring process that we've done sort of stand. And I still like scenario one.
Thank you. And I do just want to note that our fabulous team has been crunching numbers as you're coming up with suggestions, and we are happy to share those with you. But again, the percentages really don't shift, unless you want to make a big change to those tiers.
Really, the distinctions even between tier 1 and tier 2 are, I mean, except for in the middle section is the place that I hear Simon really kind of fighting for, you know, is that more fully adequately funding that middle tier. So yeah, on the bottom tier, the difference, I'm not sure. Yeah.
I mean, for that middle tier, I mean, I would even be inclined to be 85, 75. I think we had some strong proposals in that middle tier. And I think a 30% cut is a lot.
I think it makes sense possibly also to recognize that the starting point that's listed in this document is not what their original request was either, that it's already been cut in certain ways. And so that's not the starting point of the original request.
That is correct. We did our regular procedure of taking out unallowables and all of that. But it was across the board only about a $400,000 cut. So it was relatively minimal. But you are correct, is that it's not the total ask that was given to us. So
I am absorbing the feedback. I'm not sitting in silence, dug in. I'm absorbing feedback. Just to comment on my lack of saying anything in this moment.
And it is I mean, it's a challenging decision to make. These are, as we've said, really good proposals overall. So I think just continuing to talk it out until we get to a place where we feel comfortable is the right thing to do. I did hear from some of those last comments that the scenario one is really kind of the lowest that some folks are willing to go in terms of the budget for the middle and bottom tier. So yeah,
Yes,
please
that's
continue to talk. We also have some other scenarios that, like I said, you mentioned in passing, and we can show those to you as well if you think that would be helpful. Again, the dollar amount changes aren't great, but we're happy to share those with you if you think that would help your decision making.
I'm wondering what some of the other folks are thinking that haven't spoken, where you're leaning and whether we should just do a math problem with those bottom two tiers and come somewhere in the middle, or I'm just wondering what other people are thinking.
So there's only 6 GAC members. I think everyone has actually spoken, but participation is always welcome.
This is Shannon Wilson. I'll just take the opportunity since okay. So I'll just take the opportunity. I'm just wondering about. I mean, I don't like this. I'm just trying to find a solution here. So I would like to see if we did an 84% at the top and then made the adjustment to the bottom tier. I really don't want to. Would that be enough to kind of, yeah, without diminishing the middle tier scenario 170%? Would that get us there? Would that get us to, like, if we did you know what I'm saying? Would that get us closer to the 23.13 for the bottom tier?
So that would bring the bottom tier up to 23.7%, and we can absolutely share that with you visually if you would like. If the middle remains at 65%. Okay.
I'm not at 65. I'm wondering if we take the top tier 84, leave the middle at 70, what does that put the bottom tier at under scenario 2?
If you give us a moment, we can give you that number, and then yeah.
So
Hannah, our fantastic budget calculator, is working on it.
So that's 84 top, 70 middle, and the balance for the lower level. Got it.
Okay, I'm just gonna think out loud here. First, reaction is I don't want to cut the top tier. Second reaction is if we're crunching more numbers, let's just see all the scenarios that have been crunched, because I know we had asked you all to run numbers on one of the other ones and we hadn't actually asked you to show it. So at the risk of making this even more challenging, I guess if we're gonna do that, I just want to see all the information. Cool.
We can do that. If you'll just hold on a second. So I'm gonna have to stop sharing the screen so they can insert the results into the slide deck. So excuse me for the interruption, but we'll present those to you momentarily. All right. Okay, actually, you know what? I think we're gonna ask to take another break of about 15 minutes just to make sure we have everything so we can present it all at once, if that's okay with you guys. So let's come back here at 12:18. Okay, everyone good with that? All right, we'll see you in a few. All right, we have one more minute left on the break, so if folks can start coming back from the GAC and just similar to before, turn on your video real quick so I can just make sure we still have quorum. That would be great. Thank you, thank you. Got 3 people, 4, 5. We're just waiting on Shannon. And then we can get started again. So again, thank you guys all for your patience with this as we do these calculations. Like I said in the beginning, you know, that just allows us the flexibility to take those recommendations that you're making and implement them live so you can see the results. So as soon as Shannon gets back, we can discuss these new options that we have based on the recommendations that you guys discussed before. It was just brought to my attention too that, you know, again, if we're not able to come to one unified recommendation today, rather than presenting both, if folks are not comfortable with that, rather than presenting both options to the grant advisory committee, we could also, you know, try and schedule a short GAC meeting to just do the vote again, where maybe more members would be present, so we would have somebody there to be a tiebreaker. You know, that could result in delays, but that is an option on the table as well. So Shannon, are you back with us? You know, let's give it one more minute and then we'll just go ahead and get started with the discussion. And just to double check, Tristan, are you back as well?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, thank you. All right, why don't we just go ahead and start talking through the discussion and hopefully Shannon will jump back on. So we did try and capture all of the different suggestions that you folks put out there. So we have those original 2 scenarios, scenario 1 and scenario 2 that we discussed. Then we have the alternate scenarios. So the compromise 1 and 2 has the top tier funded at 85%, the middle at 67.5, and that would leave 22.22 for the bottom. The next scenario is just to move that top tier down to 84%, the middle keep it at 65%, and then that leaves the bottom tier with 23.7% of their adjusted ask. The last tier on this slide is very similar, but with the middle tier at 70%, and that drops the remainder available to 21.88% of the adjusted budget request for those bottom tier applicants. And then we have a couple more scenarios on this slide. I don't know if you want to just take a moment and take in these scenarios and then we can jump to the next slide. It's a lot of numbers, so. looks like Elaine has a comment.
Yeah, it seems like where the numbers really change much is when we drop out the middle section, which kind of pushes against Simon's hope to and others' hope to sort of keep the middle more well-funded. And otherwise, it doesn't make much. The numbers at the bottom, in any of these scenarios, don't change hugely, but the biggest change is when it drops to 65% from 70%. So maybe the place to focus our eyes is on the drop in that first scenario and second scenario middle tier gives you the most information.
So I think on the second slide, sorry, I'll flip to that real quick. This scenario 6 does drop that top number a little bit, so that might reflect a little differently in those tier percentages. So we'll put that on the screen for a moment. So do any other GAC members have, immediate thoughts or reactions? We do always have those 2 initial scenarios that we can go back to.
I guess my initial reactions are that I don't like scenarios 6 and 7. Which are not pictured here, but.
Simon, I agree with Kristen. I don't particularly like 6 or 7, and I still like number 1. I think it's the strongest.
I agree. We could drop 6 and 7 off.
Okay, we'll focus on the scenarios on this slide, unless anyone else thinks differently.
I still like scenario 2, but I would be willing to go with the compromise option.
I agree with Tristan on that one. I still like scenario 2, but I'd be willing to go to the compromise scenario.
Feel free to make a motion if you would like to at any point.
I mean, I'm happy to make a motion, but I don't know, I guess maybe this is me popping out of making a motion, but I'm just curious if folks who are in scenario 1 camp would be willing to do the compromise. But maybe that's what making a motion figures out.
It can happen either way. We're gonna have to vote on it eventually, but it can definitely happen either way.
Is Shannon back yet?
Oh, yeah.
I'm sorry, what was that?
I said, is Shannon back yet?
Oh, Shannon, have you joined us? She doesn't
Well, to
seem to be.
answer, she
Yeah.
seems not to be yet.
I thought she said something a minute ago, but maybe that was someone else.
Well, to answer Tristan's question, I still strongly believe scenario 1 is the better scenario. And in the interests of coming to a more unanimous decision, I'm willing to support compromise 1 and 2, although I still think scenario 1 is the much stronger proposal for the programs.
This is Elaine. I'm somewhere between compromise 1 and 2 and scenario 5. Just because it preserves that middle group a little bit more without huge cuts so I'm sort of just looking at those numbers going back and forth between those two, between compromise 1 and 2 and scenario 5. So for the reasons that have been put on the table.
I like that one too. More than compromise 1 and 2.
Make things even more spicy, I would vote for scenario 1 before I voted for scenario 5.
Spicy.
You are spicy. That is so fun. Can you say why though? Can you say why?
I don't want to cut the top any more than we have.
Okay. Ooh, Tristan, you're tempting me around this. I'm just trying to think about, I mean, these are really significant reasons and decisions. So, yeah. So because the difference is so slight between scenario 1 and scenario 5, then it just doesn't do that much for the bottom tier. Then got it.
So Shannon, have you returned yet? No. All right, we're reaching out to her separately. So.
We need Shannon for the vote, don't we?
We do. We have a cliffhanger right now, as my granddaughter would say.
Okay, I'm here. I just am having big time technical difficulties. So I heard all of that. There was something on I switched over to my phone and there was something in like my microphone was not enabled and I'm not techie. And so I had to search through different settings. My apologies.
No worries. We just are happy to have you still on board. So out of those 3 or 4 different scenarios that have been mentioned now, do we have anyone that is rising to the top that someone wants to put forward a motion on? And alternatively, we can just go back to what was already determined with the 50-50 split and present both options to the commission.
I'll make a motion for scenario compromise 1 and 2.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
I'll second that one.
Excellent. Can we go ahead and do a roll call vote, please?
Kristen Edwards.
I vote in favor.
Kathleen Meehan Coop.
Oh, I'm struggling. I'm gonna vote against right now.
Shannon Wilson.
I'm sorry. Can we pause this? Can I see the slide again one more time?
Is it not showing? It's the
Oh, it's
middle
actually-
scenario called compromise 1
Oh,
and 2,
gosh.
that column. Yeah.
Okay, so it's a me problem. Hold on, I'm gonna jump back on my computer. I'm sorry, hold on.
No worries.
I'll come back to Shannon.
Okay.
Simon Fulford,
I vote in favor of compromise 1 and 2.
Brandon Brown,
I vote for yes on compromise 1 and 2.
okay, and Elaine Walters.
I would vote for that. I will vote for that.
So then we will need to come back to Shannon so that we have enough votes to achieve quorum, but I believe it will pass. So Shannon,
Yeah, sorry, I know you can hear me. You can hear my grunting. Yeah, I'm gonna vote in favor.
okay, that passes, Rima.
All right, we have a unified recommendation to go forward with the compromise 1 and 2 scenario, as shown in this table. So what we can do here is, if you want to see a clean version of this, we can put that together. So if you'll wait just a second, we're just gonna put that table together. We'll show what that result looks like for everyone to just, absorb it. So I'll need to take down the presentation and re-upload it, if you don't mind.
Mhm.
And we're not going to take a break. We should be able to just fill in, but it will take a minute. So your patience is appreciated.